look at this. Whoa! Embiid going at it with Karl Anthony Towns. And the bench is empty. My goodness.
The NBA is full of players who have competitive natures that are unmatched by most regular people. This need to be better than the rest fuels players to perform at the highest level possible. But sometimes, two athletes' desire to win causes them to butt heads and break out into a fight. Then, there's other times where players act childish and try to persuade an opponent to start a fight. So in today's video, we will be looking at those times when players got into the most petty NBA fights in recent memory. The first petty NBA fight on our list is a recent one, coming from late October of 2019. This one was between Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns, and it got a ton of attention from the media. As most NBA fans know, Embiid prides himself on being a troll on and off the court. While always having a smile on his face, he enjoys showboating after scoring, talking smack to his opponents, and even making petty comments on social media such as Instagram and Twitter. At one point, he even changed his Twitter handle to Troel Embiid. Before getting into the on-court fight, we need to give some background to the history between Cat and Embiid. Obviously, these are top-tier centers in the league, and it's usually a physical, competitive game between the two of them. After a Sixers-Timberwolves game in December of 2017, Embiid posted a picture from the game on Instagram with a caption saying, "Euro stepping our way through Minnesota, and we ended up raising the cat last night. Hashtag the process." This was an obvious dig at Towns, so he commented, "That caption was as trash as your picture quality." Joel, being the troll that he is, went straight at Cat and replied with, "Better quality than your defense." This was the start of their beef, as Cat is one of the best offensive centers in the league, but lacks on the defensive end. Fast forward 2 years, and we have one of the pettiest NBA fights ever. It was the third quarter of the game, and the Sixers were up by 20. In the previous possession, Embiid had backed down Towns in the post and scored a contested bucket. Then, on the other end, Cat had the ball, and Embiid came over to double team him, causing a turnover. Unfortunately, the camera panned away from the two big men, so we can't be sure what started the fight, but one could only assume that Joel was talking smack about beating him so badly. Right after the Sixers scored a layup on the opposite end of the court following Cat's turnover, the refs started blowing their whistles like crazy, and everyone saw Towns and Embiid going at it. The two were trying to get each other in headlocks and ended up wrestling each other to the ground. Everyone on the court started to get involved, and security and the refs tried to break up the fight. Ben Simmons somehow got between them and forced Cat to tap out after almost choking him on the ground. Eventually, all the players were dragged off each other, and in classic Embiid fashion, he started laughing and smiling after the fight. Sixers fans loved his energy, and his bench was hyping him up as well. Both big men were ejected, and Joel was signaling for the crowd to make some noise as he was walking off the court. Towns, on the other hand, didn't seem to be so thrilled about the fight, as it was probably more serious for him. This goes to show that Embiid's tactics to get under his opponent's skin really does work. To think that this fight all started because of beef on social media and on-the-court competition definitely proves that this is one of the most petty fights in NBA history. This next fight wasn't as intense as the last one, but is on a whole other level of pettiness. It occurred in November of 2017, just a few games into the season between the Cavs and the Knicks. The beef started well before tip-off when the Knicks players heard of LeBron's criticisms of their recent lottery draft pick, Frank Ntilikina. The 2017 draft was definitely one of the more hyped-up drafts in recent memory, with guys like Jason Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, Lonzo Ball, and many others getting a ton of attention. The Knicks had the 8th overall pick, so they had a pretty good chance of selecting a player that would help their rather weak roster improve. Instead of taking a guy like Donovan Mitchell or Bam Adebayo, who are now all-stars in only their 3rd season, the Knicks decided to draft an international player who was known for his defense, Frank Ntilikina. I'd say the majority of NBA and Knicks fans were curious as to why New York went with this type of pick over a player like Dennis Smith Jr., whose athleticism would be top tier in the league. Obviously, now we know that both players haven't really shown much improvement, and Dennis actually did end up on the Knicks after the Porzingis trade, but at the time, no one really knew what would happen, and many, including LeBron James, were very high on DSJ. So before the first meeting of the season between Cleveland and New York, LeBron was interviewed and asked what he thought of the Knicks' new draft pick. And all he had to say was that New York passed on a good player and are gonna regret it. Enes Kanter and the Knicks caught wind of what James had to say and felt like he blatantly disrespected the Knicks front office and Frank himself. So when the game started, there was already tension between LeBron, Frank, and Kanter. With about 20 seconds left of the first quarter, LeBron finished a lob from Wade. Then, as Frank goes to collect the ball to inbound it, James decides to stand in his way and purposefully bodies him up as Ntilikina is just trying to get by. It was obvious that LeBron was trying to start some beef, and it almost seemed out of character to see him instigate a petty fight on the court. Eventually, Frank gets by James after giving him a little shove, and that's when the refs and Kanter noticed that things could escalate from here. Enes comes over and gets right in the King's face, telling him to back off his teammate, and the two start to shove each other, but are quickly torn apart by the refs and other players. LeBron was the one who disrespected Frank before the game and started a scuffle during it, so Kanter felt like it was his job to stand up for the rookie, and the New York crowd absolutely loved it. This fight wasn't nearly as aggressive or crazy as the last one, but it was obvious that LeBron was being petty and was looking to send a message to Frank and the rest of the Knicks team. The last petty NBA fight on our list comes from late January of the most recent season. This was about a month before the season was suspended and occurred in a game between the Grizzlies and the Knicks. It was also about a week before Marcus Morris was traded to the Clippers, so he was still playing for New York. It was the end of a blowout game, with the Grizzlies winning by almost 20 points at Madison Square Garden. Memphis had possession with under a minute left to go, meaning that it was the polite thing to just dribble out the shot clock and end the game quicker because there was no hope of New York coming back. However, Jay Crowder had the ball on the right side of the court and decided that he didn't want to follow that unwritten rule and instead chose to take a three-pointer. Elfrid Payton, who was the closest defender to him, didn't seem to like the decision that Crowder made and chose to shove him when he went up for the shot. He did so when Crowder was in mid-air, which definitely could cause an injury if he landed in the wrong way. Jay immediately sprung up and got into a shoving match with Payton because it was completely unnecessary. The two were broken up quickly by the ref, but then Marcus Morris came over and began to escalate the fight even more. He looked like he just wanted to get involved in any way possible and began shoving Grizzlies players that weren't even involved. The fight didn't last too long and the players involved were ejected, but what made it so petty was that Payton shoved him out of nowhere just because he disagreed with Crowder taking a shot. And on top of that, in the post-game interview, Marcus Morris said the only reason he got involved is because he doesn't like how Crowder is always flapping his arms and flailing around the court. Eventually, Morris did apologize for his unnecessary words, but it just goes to show how petty NBA players can be at times. There's definitely some other petty fights that have happened in the NBA, so make sure to comment any down below and we can include them in a part 2 video. As always, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed content like this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video.